Thank you, Gil. Thank you, everyone, for coming. The idea of going up against lunch was not in the prospectus on this, so I'd like to invite anyone who's hungry. If you're hungry and want to run over to the cafeteria and get a sandwich and come back, you won't miss all that much, so feel free to do that if your tummy is rumbling. I have a talk. It's in 7 parts. The way I do these talks is I throw pictures up for people to kind of look at and expand their thinking a little bit. And then I have bullet points in between. So I know there are different norms in different places. My work covers the gamut from very sort of artistic, gamey sort of spots all the way to DoD sorts of things. I know there's a variation in terms of what people expect in terms of how many pictures and how many bullet points. So I've tried to come up with the middle ground. The talk is about the book I just released, and it is exactly perfect if you guys were in the room to see a technical overview of Bitcoin, because that is not what I'm going to present today. I feel that the moment we are in is not so much a technical moment about how to make a currency and how to manage money, but rather a more socio-cultural moment about defining what is money. How does something go from not being money to being money? And it is indeed very deeply related to what's going on in the space of games. Okay. I will have a few slides about Bitcoin. This is the Bitcoin protocol, which I will not explain because I can't. No, it isn't. I don't know what that is. I just Googled complex diagram. That's the most complex diagram on the internet. As I said, I'm not able to do this. This is what Bitcoin looks like to the user. So I'd like to start there with the user. Up above, there's a, yeah, there we go. Up above is a bunch of transactions, and down below is an overview of you know, money going out, money going in, these magical codes here, how much, you know, your balance of Bitcoins, what's confirmed, what's unconfirmed, how many transactions, who you're sending things to, who you're getting them from, and these things in parentheses. That's what it looks like. I don't know if it's very far away from what your you know, Chase Bank auto pay thing looks like, but it looks like something like this. It's a wallet. Now, the way Bitcoin operates, I thought this was funny. You know, you're looking for a picture of Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency in its peer-to-peer nature, and here it's already a stock photo. We've already at the point where so many people are giving talks on this. They've got this Bitcoin peer-to-peer thing happening, and it's a stock picture, so I had to include that. This is fair use, so they can't come after me. The basic notion is that when you make a transaction with Bitcoin, it is verified by the entire network of Bitcoin users. And within the space of, let's say, 10 minutes, you get a verification that the transaction you just conducted was true and secure. And the process of cranking through that verification is how new Bitcoins are created. They are mined in the process of verifying transactions. Bitcoin is growing. Okay, so the number, these are companies that accept Bitcoins. You know, it's not Ford Motor Company, but it's Tesla. You know, the new cars. Well, you know, Dish Network. This made some news when they announced they were accepting Bitcoin. Tiger Direct is a major source of electronics. Pirate Bay is a place where you can get torrents of pirated intellectual property, cultural property. Overstock is a big seller of things. eBay, of course. Pizza for coins. I haven't used that, but there it is. And I got a call from my local Fox News affiliate to comment on the dentist in Indianapolis who decided to start accepting Bitcoins. So we're getting more and more people adopting Bitcoins. So let's think about, well, what does that mean for the long run? How healthy is Bitcoin as a form of money? How can we assess whether we should now be running out the door and putting our money into Bitcoin? Some of the features of Bitcoin include the fact that there's only a limited number of them that is ever going to be minted. This thing is built so that it produces new coins for people who solve particularly difficult computational problems. And the system is set up so that the number of bitcoins generated when you solve one of those problems halves every once in a while. So under current and all feasible computing technologies, the Bitcoin rate of growth should level off until finally sometime, if we still have a civilization in 2030, that civilization will have a limited number of Bitcoins, 21 million. So that's an interesting feature. I'll come back to whether that's good or bad later. Economists would argue, I have a PhD in economics, so I guess I'm an economist. I would argue that should be deflationary, right? If you have a fixed amount of a currency and a growing amount of trade, the prices expressed in that currency should always fall. And yet here's the pattern of Bitcoin's prices going back to November of 2011 up to currently. And you can see that this is a very spiky sort of asset. Right? It is not one that continually declines in value, continually appreciates in value the way it's supposed to. There was this moment here in November of 2013 when it seemed like the world loved Bitcoins. It went all the way up to almost $1,200 a coin. And then it sort of plummeted down to $300. And I could tell you these stories about specific things that happened in the news. There's a particular individual in Cyprus who, when he moves his money around, that apparently causes the Bitcoin exchange rate to go up and down against the dollar. The thing is, the system is still at a small enough scale that someone with deep pockets can make its value against the dollar really change. Although it's interesting to me, if you know the Gartner hype cycle picture, it looks a lot like this. You know, a big spike, then it drops, and then gradual increase.
So we're in the trough of disillusionment?
Yeah, I think we might be just coming out of the trough of disillusionment, but maybe not. But anyway, that's not science, but I'm just sort of speculating. It's kind of interesting that it looks like that. There's definitely a cool factor with all of these things. There are a lot of hipsters that really make hay by saying, it used to be they make hay by saying, I'll buy you that beer with a Bitcoin. Now they say, I buy you that beer with a Dogecoin or a Potcoin, which comes out of Colorado. This is going back to the interface. This isn't the most user-friendly thing I've ever seen. One of the words that I hear coming out of the usability space in games and applications is that if it takes more than 2 seconds to go from the thought in your head to the hardware or software application actually doing whatever it is you thought it was supposed to do, it's too long. It has to take 2 seconds. All right? And you know, average people are never going to enjoy seeing this kind of stuff in their interfaces. To technicians, big deal. It's a bunch of symbols. They're all symbols. There's no difference between that set of symbols and that set of symbols. But when you're thinking about the socio-cultural uptake of a form of money, that's pretty significant. And as I was talking to Gil beforehand, when people say that Bitcoin is a very secure currency, they're talking about the security of the cybernetic protocol. They're not really talking about the wetware. And we all know that human beings are the security risk. So it is proven to be not completely impossible. I understand there's been some work here on this problem, or problem opportunity, depending on how you look at it, of figuring out who's using Bitcoins to do what. And talking to people in the space, there are some currencies that are being created where it is much harder to connect the currency user to an individual. Okay, so Bitcoin is comparatively easy on that front. Oh, you can't really see this as well. There's a great big light blue circle around something called Litecoin, which is invented as a, calling themselves the silver to Bitcoin's gold. The primary differences are Bitcoin can be mined more quickly if you have parallel processors, and Litecoin supposedly can't, but now they say, well, no, there's technologies that allow you to do this. So there's this mining difference. Hello. And the other difference is Litecoin gives you your confirmation in about 2.5 minutes rather than 10 minutes. And the engineers on the forums are like, who cares about that? But think about it from a usability standpoint. I'm at Burger King. I want to use my cryptocurrency. Wait 10 minutes for your Whopper versus wait 2.5 minutes for your Whopper. Okay, this is not purely a technological phenomenon. This is a social, cultural issue that we're talking about. So what this is, by the way, this set of data from crypto coin charts is, in the last 24 hours, what's the total amount of transaction in the different coins? So you see, here's Bitcoin, big, black coin, cloak, crypt, dark coin, which is really trying to be super anonymous. And then this light coin, this silver. So takeaways on Bitcoin. It is a complex but secure and reliable software money management tool. It is not particularly user-friendly right now. It eludes control. It's peer-to-peer, something I didn't put up here, but it's fixed. In other words, once a cryptocurrency is released into the wild, you can't change the software. It's going to do what it's going to do. Okay, so it's not something that can be manipulated later. It is accepted by a growing number of companies, fixed number of coins. The value, however, is unstable at the moment. Do not invest in Bitcoin right now. Security issues do exist, and there are many competitors. Okay, so I want to talk about where did all this come from? Why is this even happening? It comes from games, massively multiplayer games. Okay. Massively multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs, which I talked a lot to the Defense Department about 10 years ago. What seems to have happened is there are innovations in that space that get refined and tested, and some of them spring out into the real world. So Twitter, okay, was birthed in the multi-user online space, and it was like, why have a game? Why don't we just have a place where you could express something and it goes out into what I would call general chat, the chat of the world. Social networking software. You know, if you really wanted to see people talking about who they are and what they do, going into game spaces would be a place to find that back in the 80s and 90s. Same thing with money. Okay, virtual money is something that was founded in game spaces. And the whole idea of trading a virtual money for real money was big news in 2005. You know, people say, well, why would anyone spend real money to get something that it isn't even real? It's gold pieces in some game. The same question I get from people today about Bitcoin. Why would anyone? But you can see this is a very recent thing. Okay, so this is the exchange rate between World of Warcraft gold and Bitcoin, and it is also not supported by anything, just as Bitcoin isn't. Something to point out, though, something that is pretty interesting, changing in this particular space. We speak hardcore World of Warcraft gaming, not Chinese. What are they referring to? The gold farming and the money management that was going on in game virtual currencies spawned this mining industry in any country where the income salaries were low, but the internet was present. So it was places Eastern Europe, China, Indonesia, India. And people would run these sweatshops, so they'd get people together, typically young men, and have them play the game to collect the gold, and then sell the gold via these sort of aggregator sites to Westerners and Europeans, who would then play the game and have more gold. Okay? So it's interesting that then what the Bitcoin people did was they said, well, let's make a protocol that does not involve human beings managing the system, okay, on the one hand, and also is completely open about the idea of mining. In fact, you can mine with bots. And so these are Bitcoin mining rigs that people have developed to try and get as much Bitcoin out of the system as possible. So sort of the idea of replacing the humans who are mining the virtual world's games with machines. But the source of all this goes back 30 years. Text-based MUDs. This is a game called Gemstone 4. Up here we have an inventory, classic, you know, weapons and armor and so on. Here's a chat channel. This is called Thoughts, and this is the precursor to something like Twitter, just sort of saying little statements. And among this is anyone selling double leather this evening? Anyone interested in a gown? So it's a proto-market. And and you can see, you know, Angelique murmurs a chant, gestures, and then Angelique's left eye looks better. So she's performing a service. She's casting a spell that does something. So we have goods and services being created and traded. Here's a small lump of white substance appears in the air and falls to the ground. Lamy offers Angelique a bright chrysoberyl gem. Okay, that's the payment. Gemstone generated a currency that was traded against the dollar. And there was a guy I talked to back in the day who said, I am the Federal Reserve of the gemstone world because I have all the money. I am the monetary policy authority for this. Okay, so the gold pieces really are the environment in which this was tried and tested, refined. At that time, it was part human and part software-based money management. They moved from human beings saying, oh my gosh, we've got a horrible inflation, let's change this, to automated systems that watch the amount of trade going back and forth and then put little percentage taxes and little refunds where they want it. They've developed this sophisticated, in the games, this faucet and sink approach to money management that is automated. But it did generate this mining activity. But Bitcoin's miners just rely on machines. Nonetheless, this is all very old. My point is this is all very old. Virtual money, in other words, wasn't just invented in 2009. It's been around for a long time. Okay. It is a species of money. I have to think about what makes something money. This is money. You may have seen it. What does it say on it? Okay. It says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. That is, if I owe you money and I give you $1, you have to take it. It says that's the law. That's what it says. But what's interesting is that's all it says. Let's go back to earlier dollars. Okay. Earlier dollars say things like, this is national currency. I'm national currency. This note is secured by the bonds of the United States. This is a secure form of money. Those bonds have been deposited with the U.S. Treasury in Washington. You better listen. This is valuable stuff you're holding in your hands. Now, it's been given out by the Citizens National Bank of Bowling Green, Kentucky. Okay? But it says that the Citizens National Bank, against the presentation of this bill, will pay $10 in specie. That is, if you walk up to the bank with that piece of paper and lay it down, they will give you $10 of U.S. gold coins. It's backed by gold. So you see this bill, this piece of paper is screaming at you. This has value. Here's another one. It's about from the 1880s. Looks kind of similar, the obligatory half-dressed ladies. People's Bank of Paterson, $8. There's nothing in here about the U.S. government or hand this in and we'll give you something backed on by the government. This is money issued by a bank. There's actually no law in this country against anybody creating a bank, creating money. Noblis could create its own currency tomorrow. You can't make a currency that says U.S. dollars on it. That's counterfeiting. But you can make, I can make TED coin tonight, and the government right now can't touch me. Okay, so making currency is something that has been going on in this country for a very long time. Now, why is this an issue? When you had, in those days, lots of private currencies, if I have my pocket full of Paterson, New Jersey bank dollars, and Paterson, New Jersey bank goes under, those dollars now are worthless. Okay? And if I was going to use those to pay my debts to this bank says, where's our money? And I'm like, well, here's the thing. And they're like, you're giving me pieces of paper. This isn't going to do it. So then they go under. And their money isn't worth anything. This is what Jimmy Stewart was trying to explain to these people. That the money, we have confidence in our money, we have confidence in our bank because we have confidence in our bank. Right? It's not necessarily because there's a government standing behind it, but because it's a social convention. These conventions can break down. This is German money from the early 20s. It says 100 million marks. This could buy a piece of bread. You know, here's kids flying kites with the money. Here's the lady burning the money. It's better to burn it than use it. Here's an East German mark. It's very funny. I got to make a comment. She's pretty happy to be in East Germany. I'm not sure about this. This guy's like, boy, it stinks to live here. But this is in 1985. In 1985, this wasn't worth very much. And then during the course of 1989, it got worth less and less. And then in October of 1990, the West German government said, we'll accept these at a 1-to-1 exchange rate for German marks. And so the value of that piece of paper went like this as a result of some of the statements made by governments. This is a gold coin. Okay, remember I said that you could hand in paper and get a gold coin? What's that worth? Well, it's worth gold. You know what? Gold can be mined. Okay, so the value of gold can also be found in South America. So if you were living in Spain and you had value of gold coins, and then these flood of gold stuff coming from South America, stolen, suddenly causes your gold coin not to be worth very much. And also you can take this and mix it with other metals, so it isn't really gold. What's that worth? What is this money worth? Salt has been money. Cigarettes have been money. What is it about all these things that makes them all money? Beaver pelts have been money, and probably still is money in northern Wisconsin. My favorite example, this is the island of Yap in the Western Carolina Islands here. Those big rocks are the money. They don't even really move them around. They say, you know, I'll take this rock and you can have a hut and 2 of my husbands and we'll call it even. They're not worth much. So, and these things are very expensive. You have to go to another island and put them on one of those rickety boats and bring them. This is money. Now, how can all these things be money? You can think about what makes something money. Money's old. This is what we learned. Many things have been called that. Nothing is naturally or technically money. It's not like there's something out there that, well, of course, that's money. Money is something we all agree it's going to be money. Economists say it's any good that serves 3, perhaps 4 functions. The economists all agree on 3. Store of value, medium of exchange, measure of account. And what we're learning through games is that money is also a source of well-being. That doesn't really define money, but it is an outcome of money. Money is often the score in economic competitions, and it's a measure of safety and security, which is why, this is very weird, but whenever you play any kind of a game, why does it have stores and merchants and money in it? Don't most people say that they hate the economy? When I'm at a wedding and I say I'm an economist, like, oh God, I hate economics, it's awful. How could you study that? I'm not really sure. And yet when we sit down, we play Settlers of Catan, you know, there's an economy in it. When we play online role-playing games, there's always a merchant. There's always money. Money seems to be something that makes us really happy. So where does this convention come from? Okay, it's uncomfortable, but we have to talk about the analytics, the engineering of fantasy. How do fantasy notions become social reality? It's a matter of crowd psychology, right? Remember I said about Jimmy Stewart trying to explain to everyone that you have confidence in your bank because everyone has confidence in your bank, which justifies confidence in your bank. It's a mass phenomenon. To explain this, I'll use the example. At the top, we have a country where people drive on this side and drive on the left side, okay? So from your perspective, they're driving on the left-hand side, but let's look at these people. They turn around, now they have my perspective. They're also driving on the left-hand side. Everyone's driving on the left. Down here, everyone's driving on the right, okay? We know that they both work. There are countries today that drive like that and countries today that drive like that. There isn't anything technically different about them. It's 2 outcomes that are equally feasible from the same game. How does that happen? Let's just think through the game theory of this. I wake up in the morning and I am in Virginia. I expect everyone in this state, when they drive down the road, to be driving on the right side from their perspective. Therefore, the sensible thing for me to do is to drive on the right side. Okay? The next day I wake up and I'm in England. I expect everyone to drive on the left side. So it makes sense for me to drive on the left side. Now, why do those choices make sense? They make sense because everybody else is expecting the same thing. It is a shared expectation. A convention is a shared expectation of behavior. So the difference between these 2 pictures is really the people at the top have one sort of collective fantasy, and the people in the bottom have another sort of collective fantasy, where I'm using the notion of fantasy to just emphasize how ephemeral it is. That if you could get those people to think in a different way, the upper people, they'd start acting like that. You get these people to think a different way, they'll start acting like that. How do I know? Because that's the same country. It's the same roadway. That's Sweden. In 1967, they drove on the left, okay? And then they changed to driving on the right. Here's when they changed. There was some confusion. You can see the happy pedestrians are coming out to say, okay, everybody go over here. And this truck driver is not having any of it, and this cabbie is. So we can change our conventions. We can change from one set of expectations to another. How does it happen? In 1938, Johan Huizinga, a Dutch historian, wrote a book called Homo Ludens, Playing Man, that we need to play. That as we are going through this happy life, we work, and then we have time for leisure. And on the one hand, when you say leisure, that's just goofing off time. But the goofing off space is often a place where society can try out different ways of doing things. Those of you who remember Sadie Hawkins dances, I don't know if they even do them, but there was a time when you could not ask someone to a dance unless you were a boy. And Sadie Hawkins' dance was like, well, what would happen? What would happen? Would the world fall apart if girls could ask boys to dances? Let's try that out once a year. So it's like the little seed. We could do this in a different way. We could do this in a different way. This is a kind of a ritual. Maybe the norm would be that I would stand in the middle. I won't make anybody uncomfortable, but I could go stand in the middle, and there could be a circle around me. But we do it this way. So the play space is a place where we work out these rituals and conventions. It's a pretty serious mental module that doesn't get a whole lot of study. You cannot talk to your dog, but you can play with your dog. Okay? Play as a mammalian phenomenon. Actually, reptiles do play a little bit. As a phenomenon is apparently a pretty uniquely adapted and important site of the mind. So I've just kind of asked you to imagine, what happens if we all start thinking that there's an invisible rabbit over there, then effectively there kind of is one. And what we're asking about money is, when is the rabbit really there, and when is the rabbit really not there? This is not a... people who are fairly serious have talked about this sort of thing. Like Einstein, but like one of the strongest motives that lead men to art and science is escape from everyday life. Right? So the role of hypothesis in scientific thinking about things that aren't in existence yet, and trying to imagine what the world would be like if they were in existence. All entrepreneurial creativity and innovation has that sort of process in it. And so it's kind of interesting that money came from games. That's exactly the phenomenon that I'm talking about here. And so the question isn't really how did Bitcoin become money, but like, why isn't monopoly money money? Right? Why what is it about the features of this money that keep it from becoming money? Takeaways. Social conventions are everywhere. They're powerful. They're intangible, ephemeral. Conceiving alternate patterns of convention involves hypothesis, imagination, and fantasy. Studies of the evolutionary and cultural significance of play and games suggest that these sites are uniquely adapted for generating new conventions and moving populations into them. Shouldn't come as any surprise that digital money first emerged in games. The moment we're in right now does not involve better or worse management of forms of money, but rather how new things come to be known as money. So here comes technology. This is the technology of the game Monopoly. That's why Monopoly money is not accepted. This is an image of a Monopoly board created in the game Minecraft. Okay? If you look carefully, it looks like Monopoly, but the actual size of an avatar in this world is about this tall. So you can use technology to implement a vast Monopoly game. And that's basically what's happening. The Bitcoin protocol is loose in the world. Its basic functions and features are known. And these are the hundreds of coins that have been made using it. So the situation right now is we have a bunch of little coins, one kind of a big coin, and we got to guess what is going to happen now based on everything we know. Here's what happened to social media. We started out with lots of competitors, Friendster, MySpace, Orkut, and ended up with one big one. That could happen in the virtual money space. There could be one coin that figures out the security, the usability, while keeping the sort of free transaction, the unencumbered nature, the lack of regulation, lack of taxation, and take advantage of scale economies, because scale economies are important with money, develop security and reputation, grow to be the world currency. That could happen. But there's another thing that could happen. Look in the news media space, New York Times, the Gray Lady, then MSNBC, which was sort of an attempt to be a newspaper online, to Huffington Post, and now we're at Reddit. So this is the news from the standpoint of most young people today. They go to Reddit, and this is what's important to them. So Reddit is kind of this collection of a lot of different things. We could see that. There could be a huge collection of different virtual currencies that serve different purposes. Now, the government, we'll talk about policy in a second, but this puts all of us in this situation where we're in an arms race. The virtual currency is sort of exploding, doing things that we may or may not like, and then we have to respond to that. We have to keep up with what's happening in the money space. So, and I'm sure everyone here understands this, that it's kind of like security, right? You never really turn the corner on cybersecurity. It's just the attacks get tougher and the countermeasures get tougher. And that's just the road that we're on, increasing expenditures on this. The mental capacity for making technology is as old as humanity. I'm speeding up here a little bit, I apologize, but I'd like to get questions. What's new is that technology allows anybody who wants to make a currency that goes outside of the monopoly game and can cover the whole world. And with thousands of competitors, people are going to come up with good answers. The hardware is in place, the software is there, and understanding of the phenomenon is growing. Bitcoin is showing people that it's possible. So we can expect thousands of these things. I think there will always be a role for secure, stable, large network money. There will always be a role for the dollar. Right? I don't see this, actually I don't see a Facebook thing coming along and displacing the dollar. But at the same time, I think there always is going to be a role for small, untaxed, unregulated, small network neighborly money. So, when we talk about evading taxation, Bitcoin is something that, everybody is aware of and is, well, you got to tax and regulate that. But what about when you just loan your neighbor a chainsaw and he gives you his lawnmower? Technically, you just incurred a tax by doing that. But you don't pay it because the government doesn't see it and you're not going to do anything about it. It could be with these virtual currencies that there's a lot of that going on. Oh, look, I found a new coin. Here, let me give you some of these Noblis coins. Okay, cool. Oh, I'll give you some dollars for that. All right, awesome. And off we go. Noblis coin, Noblis is like, this is a stupid thing, so they get rid of it. And people have transferred their Noblis coins and other forms of money. All those transactions came and went over the course of, let's say, a couple of years, and nobody thought to report that to the government, and yet economic value changed hands under the radar. So, coins could be made and destroyed in the course of seconds. The real power here is going to be what I call in the book digital value transfer systems that are a layer behind this, translating between different forms of digital assets, whether it's, films, currencies, games, intellectual property, books, reports, transferring all this value. There are systems that can be designed to transfer this. And controlling all this will be difficult and expensive. Let me give a call. The Nobel laureate, Ken Rogoff, says that economies really need a single currency because of all the chaos that happens when you don't have it. So this stuff needs to be stopped and regulated right now. But as we all know, controlling things is difficult. So my own thoughts about policy. It's interesting to me that the coins that are out there typically are monetarist. Okay? They tend to have this view that there should just be a money rule and it should be in place forever. The alternative, of course, is the Keynesian approach, which says that monetary policy should try to make the economy better. It should do things with the economy. There's actually a coin called Nautilus coin that has a stabilization fund in it. So there's actually a coin saying we're going to be more Keynesian. The monetary system that is in place has benefits for different people. So as we know, the euro, everyone's like, yay, the euro. But if you're in Greece, Spain, and Ireland, it's not so much yay for the euro. If you're in Germany, it's great. If you're in Sweden, you know. So these monetary regimes really do have winners and losers. And so the monetary regime that's emerging is going to have winners and losers, which will create stress. I think, you know, I bring up, this is kind of melodramatic of me, but the idea of the failed state comes to mind. The state in our era really gains its resources from the economy and not at gunpoint, right? It does it by observing, regulating, and taxing economic transactions. I think there will be more of a role for cryptocurrencies in the future than there is now, and that's necessarily going to mean some contraction in the power of the state. I just don't see, you know, I think there'll always be a role for the dollar, but it's not going to be 98% of the economy the way it is now. Maybe it's going to be 80% of the economy. Well, you know, you take 18% of the economy away from the government, and that's going to contract the government's policy power. And you know, politically, some people think that would be great, some people think it would be awful, but I don't think we can look forward to a future of a very powerful state. But as kind of heavy as that is, that's my real, where my heart is in getting this part right, which is the games as the innovation space. This is a game, okay? And over here is the real world of industry and commerce and serious life. And I think legally and in policy, we have to keep those things distinct. It would be dumb to take environments like World of Warcraft and put income taxes on them. Right? At the same time, it would be dumb to not have some kind of regulation of whatever monetary innovations are going on in the real world. And as I said, there isn't any technical or analytical difference in these two cases. There's nothing that makes this virtual money naturally money and this virtual money naturally worthless. In other words, we have to put that barrier in. And that's not going to be easy. This is Burning Man. People do these kinds of trades all the time. IRS, I heard, this may be apocryphal, sending somebody out there to say, we got to tax all this barter that's going on at Burning Man. He wandered around for a while. I was like, we can't, forget it. So it's not easy to draw those lines between what's serious and what isn't. There is a precedent, though. When society realized that it was useful to have a fictional person, we created it. It's called a corporation. When we decided it was valuable to create a fantasy human being, we created that. In 1600, this is the charter of the Dutch the East India Company, not the Dutch one. So we can imagine a set of laws that might do that. Policy wrap-up. Single currencies are efficient and generally stable, although not completely stable, as we saw. There's a common monetary policy regime, which creates tension. Economists to this day have not been able to agree on what money should actually be doing. There are coins designed for all economic policy flavors. It seems likely that state control over the economy will weaken. Enhanced pressure to tax and regulate light markets will drive more activity into dark markets. So this is a nasty problem. And this may or may not be visible in economic statistics. Right now, our economic statistical regime is kind of blind to anything happening in the virtual currency space. I think that should change, and I'm sure it will. But for me, in the long run, the biggest issue involves the legal treatment of game and online internet spaces. Treating real life like games lets genuine harm happen to real people. Treating games like real life snuffs out a critical source of innovation. Corporation status, fictional people. There's a wonderful article by R.M. Cover in 1983 called Nomos and Narrative that argues for limited autonomy and respect to be given to alternative communities of law, such as the Amish. So that's a possible legal precedent for this. But expect to deal with more innovations coming out of this digital games area. So for example, it's normal in games that there be full employment. I'm not advocating or arguing for or against anything. It's just, it's the norm. If you go in and play a game, there's something to do and you get coin for it. There's a norm of equal wages for equal work, equal opportunity of life start, but tremendous income differentiation based on time input and social skill. People who can put themselves into guilds become very wealthy and nobody cares about it. And possibly very interesting, the idea of policy testing. People in online games never put policies out without testing them extensively first. So that might be an interesting frontier for policy innovation. That's the content of my talk. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Yes?
At one point you were discussing the names of currencies, but there was a Burger King example. One took 10 minutes, one took 2.5 minutes, and the question was why. So why would somebody spend 2.5 minutes when the cash could be 0 minutes?
It's a really good question. I think that's one reason you're not going to see cryptocurrencies being used to buy hamburgers anytime soon.
Why anything?
Well, there's some things where it's okay to wait 2.5 minutes. My point in bringing that out is that from the standpoint of the engineers and fans of cryptocurrencies, they see that as a trivial issue. And for me, I'm like, someone has to solve the 2-second problem. I think they can. But I don't think they quite understand how important it is to solve that. Because I'm with you on that. It's like, this is never going to take off until they solve that problem. So all the people putting money into Bitcoin mining rigs, you can't retroactively change what Bitcoin does. And I imagine in a few years we'll say, 10-minute waiting time, that's ridiculous.
So there's a massive fall of that market?
That's what I'm a Bitcoin skeptic. I would not put a dime into Bitcoin.
Do you see the opposite going on? Do you see a reduction of the number of global currencies, current currencies as well as the virtual currencies?
I do see increasing money going into these cryptocurrencies, but it's so small. European Central Bank put out a report in 2012, and they said all the trends are worrisome, but the scale is so small right now. So there is that movement, but it's nothing to worry about right now. Yeah.
What do you think contributes to the social process? Maybe something to from some action to invention, besides just one.
Well, I think it's a matter of designing the right game, honestly. You know, game is a word that we think, oh, it's not serious. Get the word game out of your mind then and just say, we're going to sit down with our software engineers and we're going to create an environment for real people to be in. And we're going to design some social institutions for them to interact with. And it's going to be an environment that they like to be in. Okay? So maybe they like to be in it because it's about collecting butterflies, whatever it is. But while they're doing that, we play around with how they talk to each other, how they transfer value amongst one another. And then when we see, that becomes like a petri dish. It's studying human beings at the level of the beehive, not the bee. And I see this happening sort of by the seat of your pants in the game industry and the kind of social application space, Twitter and Facebook. So that's how you do it. You create an environment, get people in, and then mess around. Yeah?
There are some who would argue that the creation of the euro was a social experiment that's failed. Can you comment? Do you have a feeling on that?
As long as people are still using it, I'm not going to call it a failure. But it's right on the, right? The rumors of collapse are going to create a collapse, right? Based on the argument I just gave. The minute everybody says, oh, the euro is worthless, it'll be worthless. But it's not always this discrete thing. It might be that people's faith in the money is declining. So I'm not going to say that it has failed yet as a currency. It has failed to meet the aspirations laid out for it, absolutely, which is that it would be one currency and everyone would be happy. It's not how money works. It's just not how money works. Yes?
Do you think the government should regulate the ability of these games that can be created, like World of Warcraft or whatever, to actually trade their currency for money?
Yes, I do. That big red line, it's so important to me because I'm a gamer. There, big red line. I would like the government to assist the game companies in keeping their worlds walled off from reality. I think it damages their power as sources of innovation as well as the gameplay to have people, buying money online and then using it in the game. I would like them to be separate, kind of like your guys' skiffs. I would like them to be, completely sealed off. It's tough to do, but I would like to see some policy innovation in that direction. Yeah.
Is there any tracking of using Bitcoin for running drugs, money, weapons?
Yeah.
Isn't it being used sort of in a nefarious way?
Yeah, I mean, this is another sort of difficulty in getting something like Bitcoin going, is the reputation it has as being a great currency if you're up to no good. So there was the website Silk Road that was a big international drug dealing site, and it was shut down. And now you can buy all the Bitcoins you want from the U.S. Marshals because they seized all the Bitcoins, and there are auctions now going on at the U.S. Marshals website. You can buy Bitcoins. So absolutely, it is the cryptocurrency. I mean, who wants a currency that is unencumbered? At the moment, it kind of looks like libertarians and crooks, right? But I think in the long run, that informal trade that I talked about is also going to be extremely important, where it's just everybody knows about these things. We've got easy wallets, like, hey, Emily, buy this for you, and we're using a currency nobody even knows that it's generating a tax burden. But at the moment, it's, yeah, people who want to. There's another one called Marine Coin, which runs entirely from boats using shortwave technologies, right? So it's like anybody who's got stuff on a boat and they want to transfer purchasing power, Marine Coin. Yeah.
So, maybe 30 years ago or so, Ken Olson was the CEO of DEC. Time to remember that.
Yeah, I'm just at that age.
He was quoted as famously saying, "I don't see a time when anybody would need a computer at home." So, given your skepticism about Bitcoin, is there any trend or a signpost or a milestone or anything in the next couple of years that will change your mind in terms of the viability of Bitcoin?
So I'm only a skeptic about Bitcoin, not about cryptocurrencies as a rule. I think there's going to be a cryptocurrency or a set of them that will be powerful. Bitcoin itself, I would believe it if I saw my kids buying Pokemon cards with Bitcoins. If I saw them have a device and pull it out, my kids are 8 and 11. You know, my kids are 47. No, my kids are 8 and 11. If I saw that level, or even better, my wife using Bitcoins to buy gas, then I would start to go. I first believed in World of Warcraft when I was walking through Walmart and I heard people talking about their characters. I was like, this is real. Yeah.
I was going to just say, to comment on that, that does happen now, though, with trading cards. I had a friend that came and gave a presentation earlier, and from their angle, Bitcoin took off from third-party market of individual trading cards and trying to
Magic the Gathering.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So that does happen, they buy with Bitcoin, but I guess my question to you is, the skepticism, do you think a lot has to do with the lack of really user-friendly interfaces? So I think technology is great. I think trying to get people to understand it and then be able to use it very easily is the problem.
Well, I think people don't understand that. I agree with you. The usability thing is a moving target, okay? If you look at a game like EVE Online that was made back in the early parts of this century, and everybody says, you can't play that game, it's not usable. So it's like the requirements of usability are getting tougher and tougher. And I think if I'm a cryptocurrency enthusiast, I would say, that wallet, it's easy. Anyone can use it. But when I talk about my kids using, I'm talking about the world they're going to be in, where usability is just, I pull like something out of my pocket and I wave it at some spot in Target and transactions happen. That's kind of where we're going. So I agree with you, but I think we all need to remember that the human being is becoming not lazier and lazier, but it's being confronted with more and more things that are easier and easier to use. And that makes it harder for everything that's kind of not so easy to use.
One last question, Ken.
Okay. Who?
Right there. Angel?
Okay. You guys work it out.
Right there.
So just a question, because when I'm asked about what's the point in the road where you're like, oh, it might shift, and you mentioned that if your kids are buying Pokemon cards, just curious, how is that different from Bitcoin's being accepted at overstock and then you get furniture at home because you paid with Bitcoin?
Because my kids aren't doing it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
My kid's 8.
Okay.
Right? I always think, or another thing I think about is.
So your wife's not.
That's true. I was thinking, another standard I always had, my mother-in-law has passed away, but I was always, if my mother-in-law uses this, I'll believe it. Because I live in this world of innovation, and I always have to have that reality check. I always have to think about my mother-in-law, And it'll be something like, she drives, uses cars, never used a computer. So it's like, by the time somebody becomes a mother-in-law, will they use this stuff? That's the question.
Well, for all of us amateur system administrators, computers became real when our parents required you to take care and maintain their machines. Ted,
There it
thanks
is.
for being here. Come back again
Okay.
and give our best to the SEC this afternoon.
Oh, I will do so.
Our Noblis friend.